What is your first instinct when you're in a situation that you don't want to be in? Well, we've been led to believe that there are three main types of responses people exhibit when exposed to dire situations: flight, fight, or freeze. Well, guess what? We know how the Lees would react: flight. So for the majority of Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng, the titular characters Marilyn and James have a difficult time facing their problems, aka in this case, their family, which results in them avoiding confrontation and skirting around difficult subjects such as race, misogynism, and apparently for them, their two children who are not named Lydia. However, simply ignoring the perceived problem does not make it disappear, and active avoidance only serves to prolong the issue, which just exacerbates it and forces one to confront an even bigger issue in the long run. Therefore, a theme I identified within the novel is the active avoidance of addressing difficult subjects often stunts the process of accepting said difficult reality. So, parent character analysis. First of all, Marilyn Lee's character exemplifies this phenomenon to a T as the washed-up Harvard graduate wannabe physician. As part of her characterization and wanting to be different and stand out from the crowd, despite being an ordinary-looking white woman, she marries James, but in doing so dooms herself to becoming the very thing she didn't want to become, the colloquial housewife. Despite her inevitable fate, she had promised herself that she would never end up like that, but she realizes she had failed when, quote, it struck her, as if someone had said it out loud. Her mother was dead, and the only thing worth remembering about her in the end was what she had cooked. Marilyn thought uneasily of her own life, of hours spent making breakfast, serving dinners, packing lunches into neat paper bags. How was it possible to spend so many hours spreading peanut butter across the bread? How is it possible to spend so many hours cooking eggs, sunny side up for James, hard-boiled for Nath, scrambled for Lydia? It behooves a good wife to know how to make an egg behave in 6 basic ways. Was she sad? Yes, she was sad. About eggs. About everything. Unquote, page 85 to 86. Please also note that she didn't say anything about how Hannah likes her eggs. Instead of facing her revelation and feelings head-on, fighting to change the course of her surprisingly domestic life with her family that she made, she chose to, quote, disappear from their lives as if she had never been there, unquote, page 100. The word choice of, quote, as if she had never been there, unquote, is deliberate from the author. Marilyn is a vital part of the family. It is physically impossible for her family to exist without her choosing to allow them to exist. Thus, it is clear that Marilyn is coping, or lying to herself, for the less Gen Z inclined. She is quite literally avoiding the mess she made for herself as a grown woman. The ramifications of this decision result in unimaginable recourse that will be covered later in this presentation. However, her choice does not even serve to further her own goals, rather it just stunts her family. James Lee suppresses his inner turmoil over being an underrepresented minority in a small town where he is not accepted by the majority of the population. It takes James 203 pages to figure out that, quote, moving would have never been enough. He sees that now. It would have been the same anywhere. Children of mixed backgrounds often struggle to find their place. The mistake was earlier, deeper, more fundamental. It had happened that morning they'd married, when the justice of the peace had looked at Marilyn and she had said yes, or earlier on that first afternoon they'd spent together, where he had stood beside the bed, naked and shy, and she had twined her legs around his waist and pulled him toward her. Earlier yet, on that first day when she'd leaned across his desk and kissed him, knocking the breath out of him like a swift, sharp punch. A million little chances to change the future. They should have never married. He should have never touched her. She should have turned around, stepped out of his office into the hallway, and walked away. He sees with utter clarity. None of this was supposed to happen. A mistake. Unquote, 203. Obviously, after his inner soliloquy and dropping the absolute bomb of, quote, your mother is right, you should have married someone more like you, unquote, page 203, a complete and utter betrayal of his entire interracial family, he flees to his student's home and proceeds to, quote, push her to the floor as he reaches for his fly, tug her skirt up, and pull her onto him, unquote, page 205. Rather than do anything about the gargantuan existential crisis he suddenly has about his supposed complacency, which, really, James, you had just as much part in any of this. It takes two to tango. In what he now deems to be a mistake, he chooses flight and cheats on the mother of his 3 children. It is only after James chooses to stop fleeing and makes the active choice to confront these complicated feelings does any healing begin for the family. It takes Marilyn finding out about Louisa and James biting the bullet and fighting with her for them to finally have a direct oral conflict with neither of them fleeing. Quote, I suppose she will be more than happy to trade student life for all of that. I just hope she does not regret it. At this word, regret, something in James flares. A hot, biting smell, like overheating wires, pricks his nostrils. Like you do, a sudden stunned silence. Get out, Marilyn says. Let us pretend, he says, that you never met me, that Lydia was never born, that none of this ever happened, unquote. Page 243 to 244. This jumpstarts the healing process because, after all, in order to heal from the familial conflict, they must acknowledge that the problem exists and face it head on. In this case, they did, rather than avoiding the problem. It serves to show that avoidance only results in staticism, in which no meaningful change happens to solve the problem, but rather preserves the issue and deepens it. As a direct consequence of Marilyn fleeing from her problems, Lydia swears to herself that if her mother ever came home and told her to finish her milk, she would finish her milk. She would brush her teeth without being asked and stop crying when the doctor gave her shots. She would go to sleep the second her mother turned out the light. She would never get sick again. She would do everything her mother told her. Everything her mother wanted, unquote. Page 137. Avoiding her children like James does teaches them that they are expendable. In fleeing from her children, Marilyn strips her daughter of her autonomy and teaches her that she must compromise her own health, joy, and peace of mind if she wants her mother to do the bare minimum and stay home and be a mother. Some of the things Lydia lists are reasonable, like finishing her milk and brushing her teeth. However, her list regresses into servitude and unrealistic expectations for a child, never getting sick again, never crying when she gets shots, doing everything her mother wants, which is no way to live a life. This indirectly leads to Lydia's death, as she sits on the dock and, quote, she looked down at the lake, which in the dark looked like nothing, just blackness, a great void beneath her. It will be all right, she told herself, and stepped out of the boat into the water, unquote. Page 276. She was only at the dock in the first place because of the suffocating expectations she had taken on and felt her life was unraveling. Thus, Marilyn's avoidance only worsened the problem and resulted in her family holding on to long-standing trauma around abandonment, which ultimately results in her daughter's death. All in all, the theme of how the active avoidance of addressing difficult subjects often stunts the process of accepting said difficult reality is reflected throughout the novel in the parents' characters and the fallout from their actions. The author sends the clear message that confrontation is healthy for normal families going through conflict, and avoidance merely traps people in a state of non-communication and freezes the problem in time. It will still be there, even after ignoring it for a few years. In order to move on, one must face the music head on. Or your 16-year-old daughter dies and forces you and your husband to reflect on your respective parenting styles and your avoidance attachment styles.